my mission, I'ma roll with what I'm giving. Got some ambition, this new edition, filling positions. Looking at the void in myself and feeling what's missing. Better watch the way you going, better go in the right direction. In the moment you stressing, but you gon' be counting blessings. And I know that for certain. Keep on working, open curtains, haters swerving, cause they ain't ready for your final version. I'm never gonna give up, fall down, I just gotta get up, yeah.
You're listening to the Tom Ficklin Show on WNHH LP 103.5 FM, your home for community radio.
Good morning. Good morning. I'd like to welcome all our viewers and our guests today. First of all, we'd like to thank Harry, our producer, for helping us put this show together. We also want to give a special thanks to Tom Ficklin, as he is allowing me and my partner, Bernard, to co-host this show today, which will be a beginning of a series of shows that we will be doing once a month, which is called Real Talk. We want to have an opportunity to talk about some information and topics in the community from a community perspective, a community feel, and eventually we'll work with Tom to figure out will we be able to announce our topics a month in advance so individuals can send in questions, or how we may be able to do it to have a few times where there's live call-ins. But without any further ado, we want to get started. Today's topic, I have some distinguished guests here, some good gentlemen that I know from not only the community, but from doing great work here in the greater New Haven area. So I'm gonna introduce my co-host, Bernard Macklin. He'll introduce our guests. We'll go around and we'll ask the guests to give a little small, 2-minute introduction of who they are and what do they do in the community. And then from there, we're going to get into a very well needed topic to discuss this morning, which is the Black perspective and Black males in the workforce, and certain things that we want to be able to let our community know that we have to look out for, be careful of, be conscious of as we grow as a community with leadership and the fellas here on our call. So I'm going to kick it over to my co-host, Bernard, and he's going to get us started.
Well, you know what, once again, I'm just excited to actually be on the call. We do have a few esteemed gentlemen on the call with us today. The first is Jamal Thomas. We want to give it up to Jamal today. Actually, he's the equity and access representative with Yale. And then I want to also show the love to Seth Poole, the Director of Systems of Care with Clifford Beards. Hopefully coming along here real soon will be Romano Kimbrough with the Ministerial Alliance. We just so happy to have you brothers on the call with us today. And I will actually go to Jamal just to give Jamal an opportunity just to introduce himself.
Thanks so much, Bernard, and Maurice. Bernard, thank you for inviting me, and Harry, thanks for all of your hard work to make this possible. I'm Jamal. I'm with Yale's Office of Institutional Equity and Access, and in that role, I help manage our program for accommodations for individuals who have disabilities. I also look into concerns related to discrimination and harassment in the workplace, but the community work, which is the stuff that's closest to my heart, is some work we do at the university around health education and outreach. And we have a men's health initiative in which we go out, partner with local barbershops and salons to do blood pressure screenings, and now in this current environment to do some education around the current pandemic. I also work with some local nonprofits, as well as some nonprofits in New York that are focused on, the areas of education and criminal justice. So that's just me in a nutshell.
And then with nothing left with high esteem, I bring on Seth Poole from Clifford Beards to give us just a little introduction of himself.
Thank you so much, Brother Bernard, Brother Maurice. Thank you for the invite. Seth Poole, New Haven, born and bred, product of the New Haven public school system, lifelong youth development professional, certified sexuality educator, and just overall, champion working towards improving outcomes for children and families in the city of New Haven. My work with Clifford Beers is specifically around reforming Medicare. Reforming Medicare for young people, and reducing the overutilization of the emergency room as primary care. So basically, getting our folks to understand that their health is a lifelong responsibility that we have to take very seriously. And in particular, I'm so happy to be here amongst brothers, because I know that it falls off with us in our younger years. We tend to stray away from going to see doctors and paying attention to our health, and it could often snowball when you get into your 40s and 50s and become more of an issue. So just raising awareness around health and wellness for our families, and being of assistance in any way possible. Myself and my team, we love the opportunities to work in partnership with you all to help children and families and people in New Haven in general. So, extremely happy to be here with y'all.
Wow, love to hear it. I just want to throw a shout out to Germano Kimbrough with the Ministerial Alliance. When he do come on the call, I just want people to know, when you think of real boots on the ground, somebody that's really invested in getting the word out, whatever the word is, whatever the situation that may be addressed, Germano is one of those people that I really believe is going to be present. He has an esteemed history within this community. I think anybody that knows somebody knows Germano. You will hear his voice before you see his face. So I'm just very proud that when he do come on the call, we just gonna kind of give him a chance to kind of add a little more to what I have already said. But I look forward to him joining us when he does. Give it back to you, Brother Williams.
We get our discussion started. As I said, we would want to make sure that everybody kind of understands the concept of the Real Talk Show. Full disclaimer, these are just opinions and thoughts of the panelists and the guests who are on the show. We want to have discussions that are robust, but also give people opportunity to look at things from different perspectives, as it doesn't always just dictate what comes from corporate America or community work, but as individuals who are doing the work in real time see some things that we feel that we want to discuss. So the first part of discussion that I want to kick off is the female-male relationships at work, as we all are males here on the call, and understand that, especially as I look at Jamal and I think of some of the work that he does over at the university, dealing with even some of the times with his sexual harassment cases, is just how are you as individuals in local communities, in esteemed positions, in good industry. We know the healthcare industry is predominantly a woman industry led by a lot of women. Me particularly, I can keep in mind, I've been in healthcare for 17 years and I've never had a male supervisor. So those dynamics are some of the things that we want to talk about this morning, as to be set out first. All our panelists on the call, we always are well respective of our women in our community, appreciative of all the fine work that's done. But how does that dynamic kind of change sometimes how we're able to not only talk and speak in a respectful way, but also to do things in a way to where we're always in a progressive way, moving not only the companies and organizations we represent, but our local community of Black and Brown individuals in our community right here. So I want to kick off first with our first panelist, Seth Poole. We go back to the playing in the playground days. he comes from a family I can speak for as because of knowing his family, of some very strong women in his family, his moms, his aunts. I know all of them. And so I just want him to speak from a perspective of coming from that background where, you, your brother, with other family members growing up with a strong background of strong family and strong females in their family. How did that help you to be able to come into the corporate world of dealing with those type of issues?
Well, thanks, Mo, for acknowledging, my fam and my aunties, because, we kind of deep, so my mom had 5 sisters, 4, yep, 4 sisters. And, they were all, active in the community, work for Yale, work for, so many different service-oriented spaces in New Haven, YMCA, school system, what have you. I want to speak to the fact that there was a lack of male leadership, in general. It's like, our leaders in my community growing up were women. So, you were kind of, I know I personally was always given directives by women. Most of my teachers were women. So, moving into the workforce and particularly in nonprofit, which to your point is, heavily female dominated or women dominated. It was kind of a natural fit. I've never had a boss that was a man. Now that I think about it, so so it's kind of one of those things that you take as the norm in this community. But my mom she was hardcore about etiquette and just chivalry, which is a dead art nowadays at times. That's how it feels. And she definitely brought us up to be very respectful. And my grandmothers reinforced that. We grew up at respectively both sides of the family, attended Varick AME Zion growing up. So that was our church home across the board. My full family moved to the north, and my brother and myself are the first 2 eldest grandchildren on both sides of the family and the firstborn in the Northeast. So it was very important for them to lay out, the lay of the land for us, because we didn't have older cousins to come save the day kind of thing. But, we had a very strong community, which was heavily male dominated. It's like there were a lot of, young men and a lot of lacking of father figures in our community. So, I've always been deeply appreciative of the work that my mother did, instilling so many transferable skills at a young age. It's like how the do's and don'ts of how you show up in public. Don't go out here embarrassing us kind of thing. That principal better not call my house kind of thing, so it kind of carries over into your work life. It's like, as you live, learn, grow, play, you got to learn how to play well in the sandbox with everybody and take directives from, people regardless of how they identify.
Great. Enjoy that. Those answers on that discussion. So now we're going to kick it over to Jamal. Jamal, give us a little family background. Like I said, once again, the thought of working in a field where it is female dominated, and how or any suggestions to some of the young brothers who are coming up that sometimes that is a difficult thought. Having a female boss and different things and interactions with different females at the job, and how to do that in a respectful way and in a community leadership way, as you do so well every day.
Thanks, Maurice. That is a lot right there. So just to start the personal side of things, I've been in New Haven. It's been my home for the last almost 7 years now. But before then, I've come from Brooklyn, and my family, that's where all my family roots are. They're, going back to the early 20th century and before then. the South, Georgia and South Carolina, with some folks from St. Kitts. And I think a lot of my family experience mirrors a lot of what Seth shared around, very strong women in the home and in family life. Thinking of, my grandmother, my great grandmother, my great great grandmother, who I was, blessed to know when I was a child. And when I think about who helped set the foundation for how we should engage with the world, and what those expectations were for both school and for work and for the community, which were all very high. Those were all things that came from the women. And for us, it was not because, thankfully on our end, the men were very present. They were all there. They were all a part of our families, and part of, the families of a lot of, other people I knew in the community in South Brooklyn. This is like in the 80s. But I think the challenge has always been that, when you ask where they were in the workforce. They were working multiple jobs. They were just so exhausted from having to do the 150% that, we have to do in order to, take care of your family, that they almost led by example more than directives. When I think about my dad, I think about the things that I saw and what I absorbed from that. And my mother, who, thankfully, because of our financial situation, could be stay at home for a lot of my childhood. It's what she said. And so I think that I think that dynamic is there. And it's something that, when we think about these gender issues in our amongst our people, one thing that I always have in mind is how many of these dynamics are based on things that are outside of our control. They're based on what choices of people are making within the systems that are there. These aren't just people making choices. It's the system that's pushing people in one direction or another. I've also had, because my background, I've worked in, before working at Yale, my entire career was working in nonprofits in New York. I worked for an organization that did alternatives to incarceration for different at-risk populations. And in that prior life, as well as in this one, almost every single supervisor I've ever had was a woman. The only exception to that was when I was a general counsel reporting to the CEO, who was a guy. Other than that, all female. And I think too, in terms of just when I reflect on why, I wonder how much of this is about the fact that women, and Black women are, no exception to this, are tracked into or encouraged to, if you have a certain set of skills, to be into what's traditionally thought of as like a helping field. So, you're pushed to be, a social worker, or pushed to do some of that kind of work in a way that might not be as much of the case when it comes to like the men I knew who were interested in helping out with the community and doing, in that kind of action. They were just focused in different directions. And I don't know how much of that just played a role, because I know, you think about your high school guidance counselor and the things they tell you that you might want to embark on as a career. They give different messages to different people, and a lot of it depends on, who they are, what their skin color is, what their gender is. And I think a lot of that plays a role in what we're seeing. In terms of people and what kind of, I don't work as much with young people directly as I once did. And I think that the big thing that I think I always emphasize when doing direct work with people and in thinking about my current life, where it's a lot of problem solving, it's for people to really learn how to draw a strong boundary between your professional self and your personal self. There may be things that you bring into the work just about how you engage with people of the opposite sex, and what signals you pick up and why, and how you might respond to those things just in your personal life. But when you're at work, I think the reality is, for most people, and I think it's important to be honest about these things, is you have to kind of adopt a persona. You can't be in most jobs, especially when you're starting out, especially when you're a Black man and we have, you know, systemic racism is a reality. You always have to be cognizant of the line between, your professional self and your personal self. And when I think about just that gender dynamic, and I know Maurice, you were thinking of it, and you asked in terms of like someone reporting to, but I'm also thinking in terms of just colleagues and the ways in which I see issues come up around, sexual misconduct and sexual harassment and people misinterpreting signals, et cetera. A lot of the challenge, and I'd say almost 90% of the challenge, it's not people who are predators. It's people who are either misinterpreting signals or people who are taking the way they might behave in a personal space and bringing it to a professional space where in a professional space, it's just not welcome. And then when you think about people from our community where there might not be the same, because of racism, we don't have the same history of being allowed into these corporate spaces. And we don't have the same, there's not, when you think about the things that are being passed down, some of those norms that are in the corporate environment may not be passed down because we weren't allowed in them. And so one of the things I think we always have to keep in mind, one of the things I always, advise young people about, is that they need to be a different version of themselves when they're at work than they would be at in a more personal space. And thinking about the gender dynamic, and I don't want to, and after this, I think I'm going to, pass back to Maurice, is I think one thing we want to really be in the habit of is thinking about across gender, across sexual orientation, across everything. When we look at, people who are within our community, is we need to be in the supportive mode in terms of thinking of ways to uplift one another. And I see a lot of that. And I think that when I think of my, personal success to the degree I've had it, it is owed to that. It is owed to the mostly Black women who saw what I was doing and decided to offer me opportunities or decided to shine a light on me. And that's something that's inspired me to do the same with whether it's a Black man or a woman. And I think there's always a push to divide us in one way or another and to highlight those differences between groups in our community. And I think one thing we always want to try to do, and I know I always try to do, is to push back against that, because we all need to. The only thing we have is each other in these spaces, and we really need to continue to support one another.
Great thoughts. So as I think about some of the things that Jamal went over, we're gonna kind of break that up a little bit into digestible information for the community struggling with a little small cold. Forgive me. So one of the things was the difference between the personal and the professional relationship. I like how you kind of explain that. But another thing, as we know, in Black and Brown communities, and I think Seth touched on that a little bit, was the lack of male leadership, not only in the home, but in the community. So how does it help us to train young males who are coming up, who want to be in leadership and want to be in these professional settings, how to be able to respect and move in a way that where everyone's respected, but also the thought of sometimes we do know that because of the thought of the Black male being a little more physical, a little more intimidating, how do you work through those different norms to always represent in a professional way when you're at the workplace? And Bernard, feel free to jump in, give your comments, but if not, we'll kick it back to Seth of navigating. Also, Seth, we also want to point out he ran for mayor in the last mayoral election. What was your thoughts on the community support, the thought of a young male coming straight here from New Haven, the challenges of leadership in our community, and how is it looked at now as we move forward in Black and brown communities, of trying to, what I say is kind of regrouping ourselves and positioning ourselves in better position, as there are many challenges. COVID has definitely brought on a lot of challenges. A lot of people lost jobs. So once again, you have that dynamic of, if males were working and they lost their job, dealing with the whole family part of how that was affected. So just shine a little light on some of the concepts and thoughts that you always try to keep in your forefront as a male in leadership in local communities.
Well, before he actually, give me a minute, Steph, before he actually comes in, I just kind of want to just expound before we get too far from this particular topic, that my greatest hero in my life, I wish would have been my father or even my grandfather, but my greatest hero in my life was my grandmother. Even to this day, I think a lot of who I am as a person stem from her, and due to the nurturing parts of her, due to the loving parts of her, due to the hustle that my grandmother had. There's the word hustle is always looked upon as a negative term, but hustling is just another way of ensuring whatever your successes is going to be. And she taught me basically how to hustle in a way where everything I did in my life, I put my best foot my best foot forward in everything. But also, working around my grandmother, she always had these terms that she would use when she's making reference to you, that if you use those terms today, you might get caught with a case. She would say baby, she would say sugar, and darling, and all of those things. And believe it or not, I would pick those things up, or young man or young lady, that she would say those things. But I found in the position that I had maybe about 3 years ago, that I used the term young lady and got in trouble. And it's just because I realize it's a different pool of people. It's a different pool in the way that people look at life. So I think as a male in this business, you have to be careful about the phrases you really use today, because things are so much more personal than they were when it comes to identity and who people say they are and who they think they would be. And so you have to be really sensitive to the way you approach, because like I said, like most of you said, I've had women supervisors. I had one male supervisor, but the rest of my supervisors were female. But the thing is that I really didn't care who was the boss. It was male or female. I didn't really get into the whole gender piece. I just wanted to do the work. So it really didn't bother me one way or the other. What it did is what I say to males: if you have a problem with someone being your supervisor that's of the opposite sex, then you have to put in the same work they put in. These young ladies, our female counterparts are working really hard. Our vice president of the United States, no one really knows her history until you look into her history to see how she got to where she's gotten. And you have to respect that. And I do. So if you want to be the vice president as a male, or the president as Obama had done, then you have to step up to the plate and do all the things that is necessary for those things to happen. But with that said, I don't want to hold it up any further. I'm going to give it back to Seth so he can answer the questions that you had asked him.
No hold up at all, Brother Bernard. Some very choice points you just made in terms of, something that I believe that we need to start with our young men of color earlier, with the concept of code switching. And code switching is basically choosing your professional language, choosing your, you don't talk to the same around your boys at happy hour as you do with your colleagues at lunchtime, even though lunchtime is a relaxed time and people kind of chill and kind of connect on a more personal level, or the water cooler or whatever, passing in the hallway. We have to prepare them for a world that is fearful of Black men in particular. I know I've been in this very large body, Maurice could tell you, since puberty. I haven't grown an inch. And it's really been, a challenge of walking into spaces and watching people jump out of their socks when you jump or walk around a corner or enter or the doors open on an elevator. You got to train yourself to not be shocked around people's responses to seeing you, and and learn how to be, because it's not personal, it's learned behavior. People come from places and spaces where we are few, if not non-existent altogether. So if they come to a town like New Haven, which 75% of the people employed in our city are not living in our city, so where are they coming from? How many transplants do we have? We don't know what their experiences are. So we have to approach everyone with our own style, our own approach, our own, words, a choice of words. And there are words, young lady got you in trouble, that messes me all the way up. Because I know when our elders call me a young man and I'm north of 35, I'm like, what do you mean, young man? I'm an accomplished young man who pays taxes and owns property. I mean, I think you could take the young off. You have my permission to, actually, and actually being self-identifying enough and confident enough to check people on how they're approaching us, because it's not like we got to walk out and meet the expectations of everybody. I mean, I don't know about you all, but I check myself at the door every single day when I walk out into society, acknowledging the fact that the spaces that I'm walking into oftentimes don't want me there. And I also walk in on some Sherman and Scranton. I don't care what you want. I earn my right to be here, and Maurice knows what I'm talking about because we grew up on the same block. We're not going to do that for you. We're not going to kowtow. We're not going to bow down. I have certificates and diplomas. I, have, to your point, done my due diligence. I've earned my space at this table. And, now as a supervisor, it presents a whole nother dynamic, because now I have to tell people what to do who don't look like me, tell people what to do who never thought they'd have to answer to me. And it's not the easiest thing to do to navigate, personalities and what have you. And, I don't know how many of you all have been supervisors, but it's not something that you're necessarily taught. You kind of assume the role and then you learn as you go. And the personalities you are working with are never the same as the ones you've worked with in the past. People are like, fingerprints, no two are the same. So, I definitely say in our community, in this community in particular, I mean, we are deeply embedded in generational trauma. And just in my young, my young man, 45 years of living here in the city of New Haven, I know who I idolized as a teen or as a preteen in the 80s. I know who I idolized in my, young adulthood throughout the 90s. And that definitely transitioned in those time periods. But what we saw was glamour and glitz, and the people with the glamour and glitz were not necessarily, doing work that was legal. And a lot of our community has thrived and grown through ill-gotten gains. So you actually have a community where those are our leaders. Our leaders are the people who were in the streets. Our leaders are the ones who have returned from incarceration to, change the dynamic of our streets and how we are and in society. And is it, is there enough, are there enough of us left? Is there enough hands on deck to, get at every young man whose, family has been without a father for 2 and 3 generations at this point, to repair the harm or to show them the right way? And the most difficult part is like when we think along the lines of like, why aren't there more people that look like us identify as Black male or Black men in our classrooms. And I think that also we need to tap them into programs such as the, or not just our classrooms, the shortage of Black doctors. We need to tap them into the programs at Meharry, which, Meharry College, way down south, the Black medical school, producing Black doctors and offering up scholarships to, young men and women of African-American descent who have managed to maintain a 3.5 GPA through their high school career and meet some other stipulations in order to achieve, in order to access this free education. The opportunities for, like the Call Me Mr. Program, which promotes young Black men becoming educators and, places them in inner city environments where, they're more likely to have access to students who look like them. And, because ultimately the difficulty with leading our people into these spaces is these jobs don't pay. You're not going to be a millionaire. You're not going to drive BMW and live in a huge, crazy house if you're, doing, preventative work. Preventative work is not heavily invested in. So it's like we have to talk to them early about expanding their opportunities to make money in other ways and to lift up that concept of what Brother Bernard said, hustle. It's like your job is just one aspect. You should be able because we are living in an at-will state. That means at will, they can fire you behind just because they don't like the way your cologne smells. And that is, our life, that's our living, that's our lifestyle. It's like every single day, what can I do to not get fired kind of approach to work and going into the world, or what can I do to not get fired upon, even worse. Which makes it difficult. So framing that for young Black men, I mean, fellas, I don't know how many of y'all are aware, I know Brother Bernard knows, but my wife and I had a son right before a pandemic, and he turned 1 in February. I have a new charge now. I have to raise a young Black man. And this is not something that I take lightly. This is not something that I have a blueprint for. Other than my own personal lived experiences, but I also don't want to shock the young man. I don't want to tear him up and put him in spaces or put his mind in a space where he feels like he's constantly in a vice or he's constantly under surveillance. But that's what it is. So it's difficult to help him. I mean, I'm overthinking this obviously because he's just eclipsed his first year. And I'm already thinking about what he's going to have to deal with when he's 6, when he's 12, when he's 15, when he starts to date, when he starts to think about, even having the freedom to ride his bike in the neighborhood. Like, we grew up with unfettered freedom. There was little to no supervision. As long as you came home at night when those lights came on, you were good. And this is a new reality. And this new reality is something that I'm not excited about raising my children in. I'm not necessarily feeling confident about what it is they'll face, especially after, our federal government is allowing for so many injustices to prevail, even though they've been videotaped. It's a tough road to hoe for our young people. And we would be foul. We would be completely wrong if we didn't make them aware that the dangers outside of the house are there. And all we can do is prepare them to how to respond to them. And I did it my way. I'm not going to say it worked all the time because I was, very stubborn, very, I'm not going to do the stuff I'm not going to do, the stuff I'm going to do. That kind of approach to life has pretty much been my mantra. It's like I very rarely would fall off of what I believe to be being true to myself to accommodate anyone else, even if it meant my job. But now I got babies and I can't move like that anymore. So even I'm in the spectrum of life that is shifting and changing, and new responsibilities, new ways of being, different codes to learn in order to switch to and from at a regular pace. So yeah, it's complicated, it's convoluted, it's everything. And as long as we're there and accessible, because access is at the core of all knowledge and attainment, is somebody telling me what's up before I walk into the storm.
Great, great comments. And so one thing that Seth brought up that brings me back to a thought that I think I really want to stress is when we think of the word leadership, it gets so misconstrued when we think of that word, especially in communities. And I always like to think of leadership as a verb. It's an action. And so, yeah, as young people are coming up in our community, they need individuals who are actively in the fight and the struggle of showing them what they need to be prepared for as they enter to different stages of your life. So as Seth talked about raising a 1-year-old and thinking of the different stages that his son is going to go through, how can he prepare his young son to be able to handle those things and to progress in his life as he goes on. It's the same thing that we're trying to do with a show like this, is bring the people the resources, the information that would help them to continue to progress and to have the real talk. Because sometimes people don't want to have these conversations, but they're well needed conversations that you need to know. Like Seth brought out, there's codes that are changing every generation, every day. That's something that was acceptable. Like Bernard talked about, calling someone a young lady could be offensive, could be something that you could be brought in the office about nowadays. I even know when I'm at work, I don't compliment women on their dress. I don't pay attention to that, to allow that to be something that could be misconstrued. Jamal mentioned a lot of times these conflicts are us trying to interpret what did a person mean when they said that, what did a person mean when they did that. And you don't want to find yourself in those situations, those perplexed situations where decision, as Seth says, we live in an at-will state. So that means if that particular employee figures something that you did based on how they feel, can have you dismissed from a job. And we know how hard it is to find successful jobs, productive jobs in our community. So we're just trying to give out a little information that hopefully can help someone as they're going through something at their job, as they're thinking at it. I like the way Bernard said, don't think of the supervisor based on the gender. Think of it as the job that needs to be done. Think of it as the leadership that that particular individual is trying to lead the team that you're on to be the best that you can be, give the best part of you that you can every day, and can helpfully navigate through these type of situations. We're coming up on maybe about 8 or 9 more minutes of discussion. I just kind of want to throw it around to the panel. Didn't want to miss this point that's happening in our local communities and throughout our country, where it seems as a successful person climbs the ladder, these scandals that come up to where we're questioning how were they in respect with women and any type of sexual connotation. What are kind of some of you guys' thoughts? First one I think of Deshaun Watson, the football player for Houston now, what he's going through with these different allegations, but it seems kind of like at a strange time in life where he doesn't want to continue to play with a team, and now it's just all of a sudden these particular allegations are coming out. So that's just things that are happening in communities. We see what's happening with Governor Cuomo in New York. We want to definitely state to our listeners and our viewers that we do not accept any disrespect to any women. So we're not questioning that whole process. If someone is being disrespected, they should have to be accountable for any of their disrespect. But the thought is as we've seen over the years, there's times when people progress in corporate America or entertainment, and then it seems like certain scandals in reference to women come about. So that's kind of the whole concept that we were talking on today's show about helping brothers to be able to navigate through systems to where they're still able to be their self. Seth talked about the lunchtime versus the happy hour conversation should be different. Those are the things that we want people to be aware of as knowing to where they're at. And I think the biggest word that was said was the space you're in at a particular time, how to navigate through those spaces. So as we're going to go through, probably everybody's going to get about 2 minutes to speak on that. Navigating the spaces that you're in. Good points for individuals to keep in mind as they're navigating those spaces. So we'll start off with Jamal. Seth can finish up, and then Bernard, you kind of will wrap it up in those types of terms. And we definitely want the ladies and the women that listen to the show today to know, of course, next month we will bring some female panelists on, and we will talk to from the female perspective, but we want to give everybody an opportunity to be able to have robust conversations that are input of our local community and the resources available to help us all be progressive. So then we'll kick off final kind of comments in reference to that space that people hold and some good suggestions when holding those spaces in our community. Okay, Jamal?
Okay, I guess first off, I think I take a lot of what Seth shared earlier around the idea of code switching to heart, and I think that there are two ways we can, if you're a young Black person entering the workforce, there are two ways that you can really view the whole issue of what's appropriate and inappropriate for the workplace. One version of it, I think, is to be very cautious and very wary and very scared, and to be in a really reactive space where you're worried that you're going to have some misstep or say some wrong thing that could result in you losing your job. And the fear is very grounded. I don't want to dismiss that, but I think that the idea of code switching and really being kind of more proactive around it is a way of addressing the situation without feeling that you have to give up some of the confidence or sense of self that you might need in order to feel okay with your life and in order to really thrive in whatever environment you're in. So if you say to yourself, I think there's a difference between the fear of, if I call a woman a young lady, how will she interpret it, rather than to simply go in and think, well, okay, I am in this professional space, and in this professional space, this is how I'm choosing to address the people I'm engaging with, or this is how I'm choosing, to compliment them, where I'm going to compliment them on something that's work related or on some kind of non-physical attribute that could potentially be misinterpreted. And because the thing that the tough part and the challenge, both in terms of kids and mentoring and ourselves, is that we're both saying you want to give people the tools to survive and to thrive, but then we also have to fight. And it's hard to balance those two things, but I think it's unfortunately what we got to do. And one thing I was really reflecting on is that I really take to heart a lot of the things that Seth shared and that I've experienced around just the realities of being a Black male in a space where there are no Black men. And that part of it is you have to get them, and thankfully, given what I do, I can do this in some ways. You got to get them to change their norms, because they shouldn't, when someone like Seth walks into a room, feel some sense of, discomfort or intimidation because a Black man who's not a slight Black man walks into a room. That's not okay. It's not okay that they respond poorly to someone with a strong voice or a certain tone. It's something that we need to push to change. And unfortunately, when you're entering the workforce, you're not going to be in a position to change that. But as you grow and as you're in a more of a position of authority, that's when I think of my responsibility as someone who's kind of at a midpoint in my career to really push for better. So when I get these, because I've had situations where people would say, this person is intimidating, and it's something you push back against. Like, what is it that makes this guy, and is there something that was done, or is this something simply that, is connected to who the person is, where it's really about them being a Black guy. The second point I guess I would want to make quickly is around the power stuff you're talking about and the scandals and what's happening with people. And what I think it is in terms of just advice giving to people is that the message that we're sharing around boundaries, I think it evolves. I think as you move up in the world, if you have something that's more of a public facing thing, I hate to say it, but I think the reality is just that those expectations become more global, where there is no personal, and I think this for myself in a very small scale is that New Haven's a small city. I know I do what I do in terms of, Yale. There's some things I can never say. There's some, whether it's lunch, happy hour, late night at a bar, there's language I can never ever use. There are things I can never, there's certain things I can never do. There are boundaries there's sacrifices that are there that are just connected to being in a certain kind of role. And because the power dynamic, because of what the expectations people have of you, or because of just what the power dynamics are. Once you're governor, you can't ever call anyone sweetie again. That's the end of that story, and so I think that's part of what is complicated, because I think that the standard that we would hold someone like Governor Cuomo to, where we say, no, in no point in your life would we expect you to do certain things. That's not quite the standard we would have for someone who's, just starting off their career as a young professional, where we really say, okay, professional, it can be here, professional, we want you to behave, you can behave in one way, and then personal, you might behave in a different way. It's a weighty topic, and actually I see the time, and I want to be respectful of that, because I could go on for another 20 minutes about this, but I really want to hear some of Seth's perspective on this as well.
At the end of the day, we're at the end of the show. And I would just leave, and maybe we can come back to this topic at another time. We can spend more time on it and pick up where we left off, and of course bring our good friend Germano back on the call at that time, so he can express his feelings on it as well. But let me say this to the public, as a Black man, my grandmother told me to love women in a way that's always respectful to the position that God had placed them in. And their nurturing is so significant to my upbringing and who I am as a person. So I would never disrespect. But what I will say to people, when you make changes, to how we represent ourselves, always remember that everybody has a choice. Everybody can choose how they choose to represent themselves. That may be different than how you choose to represent yourself. And we all have to find a way to respect each other's choices, how we want to be regarded in this community, and not take it personal that it's not your way. We all have a way that's beautiful, and allow us all to be able to express ourselves. As long as it's respectful to mankind and humanity, we should pay the respect all the way around. We thank you for this time, y'all. It's been gracious and wonderful. And I look so forward, me and Maurice look so forward to coming back into this community, giving all those that look forward to a chance to express how they feel. We're going to try to give you that opportunity. So today was a good day. And in Jesus' name, we're going to walk away with a smile, knowing that we have another day to live. Peace.
As I got another rhyme, another rhythm for y'all to listen. I'm never quitting on my mission. I'ma roll with what I'm giving. Got some ambition, this new edition, filling positions. Looking at the void in myself and feeling what's missing. Better watch the way you going. Better go in the right direction. In the moment you're stressing, but you going counting blessings. And I know that for certain. Keep on working, open curtains, haters swerving, cause they ain't ready for your final version. I'm never gonna give up. Fall down, I just gotta get up, yeah. Cause this is my